questions if you have any. Me and Professor Divya would be introducing two of the main courses for your first semester. So I think I'll get right into it. Like I said, we'll have a separate time for questions, to take up the questions. However, if you do think of a question, you want to just write it down on the chat, please feel free to do so. So I'll just introduce myself, although I think most of you, the names that I can see, attended the last discussion and I'd already introduced myself. I'm Professor Meenakshi Banerjee. My primary training is in clinical psychology. My PhD was in clinical neuropsychology. And at JSPC, I teach developmental psychology, the theory and the practicum for developmental psychology. And in second semester, I teach brain and behavior. And I also introduced an elective course last semester, which was called Mental Health, Neuroplasticity and Resilience. Right? This course was offered to the JGU community at large. All right, so let me get on to discussing a little bit about the course that I'll be teaching all of you, hopefully in the first semester, which is developmental psychology. Right? All right. So the course is called Introduction to Development Across Lifespan because instead of talking only about child development, in this particular course, we've consciously kept the entire span of development through childhood, adolescent, adulthood, and elderhood. Okay. Now, what exactly is developmental psychology? So some of you who have studied psychology before, you might understand that developmental psychologists primarily focus on human growth and the challenges across lifespan. Those could be physical, cognitive, social, intellectual, perceptual, and or changes in personality and in their emotional growth. Right? The study of developmental psychology is primarily to really understand how humans learn things, how they mature over time, and how they adapt to different life situations as they age. Developmental psychologists also conduct research, which is designed to help people reach their full potential according to their specific developmental stage. These psychologists also strive to understand and explain why people change throughout their lifespan and how these changes take place. Many of the changes are normative and these changes are expected. They can also still pose challenges that people sometimes may need extra assistance depending on their life stage and what is the task in terms of their developmental space. The principles of normative development also help these professionals to be able to figure out the potential problems and be able to identify and give early intervention. So only if we know what is normative for that particular stage, we are going to be able to find what is not happening correctly for a particular individual, what kind of difficulties this might be causing that individual. And then we look at how do we kind of use corrective measures to help them. Generally, where is developmental psychology applied? So developmental psychologists work in colleges, in universities, and they tend to focus primarily on research and teaching in these areas. Other working areas could be more applied setting like healthcare. A lot of developmental psychologists work in clinics to help assess, evaluate, and treat people who are living with certain developmental disabilities. Developmental psychologists also may work in assisted living homes for the elderly, in hospitals with people who are suffering from certain kind of developmental difficulties, mental health clinic, and also Center for Homeless. Right? These are just few applications, but we do know that we do apply developmental psychology principles in all areas. Even if you work in organizational behavior, you work in neuropsychology, you work in any area of the psychology field, you will see that developmental aspect comes in everywhere. And I think when Professor Divya talks about cognitive psychology, you'll also see that there are kind of overlapping areas in terms of how cognitively we are developing as well. Right? Now, looking specifically at our course at JSPC for developmental across lifespan, the idea is to examine individual development across the span from childhood to old age. Like I said, we don't really only teach child psychology because we understand that this is the only place that you will read about adult developmental task and old age developmental task. It also aims to describe and study the significant stages of lifespan development across various domains, like I said, physical, cognitive, social, and emotional domains. It also intends to enable students to identify developmental milestones at various stages across all of these cognitive and emotional aspects of life. The course also focuses on understanding the theoretical perspective. So, what are the major theorists? What are the kind of major issues that have come up over the years? It's not a very old field, developmental psychology. We know that it's only a few decades that this has really kind of picked up to be able to say that adolescent is a different age group and old age is a different age group, adult is a different age group. This has happened only relatively recently in terms of larger development of the discipline. So we look at what are the major debates, how have theorists tried to solve this debate. We also look at basic theories and practices that are tied to distinct stages of human development. And we also try to aid your understanding related to the changes in our behavior, cognitions, and emotions. The idea you will see as I go along talking about the course is not just to give you the theories, but also have you engage in these theories critically so that you formulate your own opinions. Right? The idea is not to have very rigid opinions, but to be able to critically analyze these theories and say how you feel about these theories as well once you apply them. The learning outcomes primarily of this course is ability of the student to evaluate different theories and debates of developmental psychology, ability to describe the significant periods of human development, for example, prenatal to late adulthood, ability to identify developmental milestones across various stages of human development, ability to conceptualize developmental needs based on specific developmental stages, and the ability to apply these concepts to the real world scenario. The last bit that we talk about will be taken up primarily in the practicum course. The practicum course is a 2-credit course, but it's quite packed with a lot of real world engagement and being able to learn what are the kind of tools that we use to be able to transfer the knowledge that we're learning in classrooms and books into the real world. So I'll talk a little bit about it once I finish this. Just to give you a broad understanding of the course material, the main textbook that we use is Laura E. Burke's Development Through the Lifespan. You will get all the textbooks in the library, hard copy and soft copy, but I would suggest that you request the person, whoever your course instructor is, to hand out a soft copy of at least the main textbook at the beginning of the semester. Okay? All of you make sure that you have the course book with you, at least the main one. So that as you go along the lectures, you can also read side by side. Right, so I'm not going to go a lot into depth of what we are teaching because you will learn that, but just briefly to understand what are the subdivisions in this particular course. So the course starts with theoretical biological environmental foundations in human development. So like I said, the field is a relatively new field, if you look at it that way. So what are the basic issues that have come up? What are the early theories in developmental psychology? And what are the now more recently accepted theories that have come up? Then we go into the biological environmental foundations, because this is the main debate that you will always find that developmental psychologists are struggling with. They're looking at whether things are genetic, whether we come in with certain dispositions, or it is the environment that shapes us, right? So this debate will come up in all kind of age groups as we go along. Then we talk about prenatal development, what's happening before the child is born and how that really affects the child. It's a very important part in developmental aspect. We go on to talk about infancy and toddlerhood. In all stages, we generally talk about physical development, we talk about the cognitive development, and we talk about the social and emotional development, right? There are some basic theories that come up when we talk about cognitive development, which is Piaget's cognitive development theory, the information processing theory, and the language development theory, right? We talk about Chomsky and some of the major thinkers who've given language development understanding. When we talk about emotional and social development, we primarily talk about Erikson's theory of development. And again, these basic theories will run across various age groups. So we will focus on them from the beginning. Then we go on to early childhood, which is 2 to 6 years. And we again talk about the physical and cognitive development in this aspect, the emotional and social development. We come back to some of the theories like Erickson's theory. We also talk about self-understanding, because in early childhood, self-understanding develops. So the purpose of developmental psychology course is also to be able to have all of you reflect on yourself and your own development, right? Because only through that we are actually able to really understand the subject the best. Right? We also talk about gender, we talk about peer relations, because these are very important aspects of growing up. Then we come to middle childhood. In this physical and cognitive development, kind of, we really focus more on information processing and language development, because this becomes a major part of a child's world. A middle childhood person is able to now express a lot of things, and how does that shape the cognitive world of the child when they're able to learn language. Right? We also talk about the social emotional development in terms of the same things, in terms of Erickson's theory, in terms of the self-understanding of the child. But now we also introduce moral aspects, right? Because again, in middle childhood, we know that children are able to distinguish and really understand morality well. Right? We also talk about gender typing and how children are now also really getting into their kind of respected genders, as we say. And we also understand now that gender is on a spectrum, so we talk a little bit about that as well. Then we go on to adolescence, and I think most of you would be in the adolescent phase or just crossed your adolescent phase. So this is a very well-liked topic that most students enjoy. We talk about puberty and what are the psychological impacts of puberty in adolescence. We talk about Piaget's theory in terms of what's happening in terms of cognitive development and how does that tie up with what is happening in an adolescent's emotional world. Of course, we say that adolescents are very emotional, very reactive, because of their hormones, but that's not the only thing, right? There's also a cognitive change that is happening for the adolescents, which is very important aspect of their emotional world as well. Right. So we also talk about how identity formation happens during adolescence, because this is the phase where children are now not adults, but they're also becoming independent of their family groups. So what is the kind of identity they're forming? What is the role of peers when they're forming this identity? And what is the moral and gender development during this time? What are the kind of problems that happen in the family space during adolescence? Right? Then we go on to discuss adulthood. What are the kind of challenges that come up during young adulthood? The individual is individuating from their families. They're also taking on more and more responsibility for themselves. They might take on their career responsibility, etc. What is happening in the domain of sexuality of an adult person? We talk a little bit about that, and we largely also focus on the family life cycle perspective during adulthood. Lastly, we talk about late adulthood, death, dying, and bereavement. I think this is one of the most difficult aspects for adolescents and young adults like you to be able to understand, because I think the imagination is relatively less of that particular age group. However, we do talk about this through various engagement in our practicum classes, on docu-series, interviewing techniques, etc., to be able to really understand what's going on in an old age person's life, what are the challenges of that aspect of life. Right? So we look at the stability and change of the self-concept. We look at relationships and how they change. We look at relationship with career and relationship with retirement as it changes in late adulthood. I'll just talk a little bit, because I've been talking about the practicum. The idea of the practicum is that it goes really well hand in hand with what you're learning in your theory classes. So we try mostly to kind of really overlap the areas that you're studying in theory classes with the kind of tools that you can use to study those concepts in the real world. Right? So the course really aims to provide the students with this skill to identify and study various domains of human development in different life stages, using the tools of either observation or interviewing or experimentation, etc. The course also intends to develop students' skill for documentation and report writing. So when you do go on, and if you do want to work in this area of developmental psychology, how do you really present your findings? How do you really say what you have observed in the real world through objective means, and through being able to add your own qualitative and subjective aspects to that objective things that you have identified? One of the main objectives of the course is to bridge the gap between theory and practice by developing students' competence to be able to explain what's happening in the real world with the help of theoretical knowledge that you have gained through the classrooms. Also, this course is designed to promote understanding of self, and there'll be a lot of focus which will constantly keep coming back to the self, and your reflective activities will be aimed around that. Right? The objective is to attain an understanding of various aspects of human development using these tools, develop documentation and reporting skills, develop ability to make connections between theoretical knowledge and real world. So like I said, these are some of the tools that we will be using. So the first part has a lot of documentaries and movie analysis during the practicum classes. We also teach the observation skill. Observation skills in development psychology are actually extremely complex. However, you get a glimpse of that in your classes because you're still in bachelor's in these early stages. But observation is one of the main tools that developmental psychologists use. Then we have checklists, the cognitive checklist, social emotional checklists, etc., and how to administer them depending on the age group that you're looking at. We will be doing some experiments primarily with adolescents, risk-taking behaviors, etc., to be able to kind of also develop your understanding of how psychologists do experimentation to arrive at data. We'll also be doing some on-field work since this semester is going to be completely offline. We will try and see if we can take you to some places where you are able to interact with different age groups. So there would be some amount of on-field work. We'll be looking at attachment and parenting styles again through the combination of checklist, scales, and observation work. We'll be looking at interview as a tool tool for developmental psychologists. How do developmental psychologists structure their interviews? What are the different kinds of interviews, and how to conduct a successful interview to get the kind of information that you're looking for. Towards the end of the course, we also have plans to have guest lectures from professionals in the field because they are able to give a really good understanding of cultural perspective. We read and study from a Western book, but it's really important that we constantly draw in developmental psychology in India to be able to understand how do we kind of culturally understand this subject, right? So this is all from my side for now. I hope you've got an understanding, an overview and bird's eye view of what we're going to be doing in this particular course. If you have any questions, like I said, please, you can write it on the chat or just keep them in your mind. Maybe once Professor Divya is also done, then we can take up all the questions together. Yeah, over to you, Professor Divya.
Thank you, Professor Meenakshi. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening. Well, I'm in Canada right now. It's early morning here. So if I might forget some stuff, that's not on me. That's on time. All right. I'm Dr. Divya Bhatia. Those of you who were present in the last interactive session, I think you might have heard all the faculties speaking about themselves. So I joined Jindal about 2 years back. And before I joined Jindal, I completed my PhD in behavioral neuroscience from Sapienza University, Italy. And before that, I worked on several projects as JRF. And then before that, I did my undergraduation and post-graduation in cognitive neuroscience. So basically, I specialize in cognitive neuroscience and behavioral neuroscience, and that's what I teach at JSPC. I teach core courses such as cognitive psychology, and in second semester, I will be teaching some of you brain and behavior. I have also been involved in teaching cross electives. Cross electives are the ones which are offered across all the schools at JGU. So in cross electives, you might be sitting along with a student who is a law student, who is an international affairs student. So I think you are now familiar with what are core courses and what are cross elective is, because I think we have already had the session where different courses, different types of courses that are offered at JGU, they were discussed. So I was also involved in teaching one cross-selective, which was known as the online brain. It was a very interesting cross-selective, which gives an idea of how your brain changes with the use of internet. So that's a little bit of my background, and I will be teaching cognitive psychology to some of you. There are 3 course instructors for cognitive psychology. Let me just share my screen. Just a second. Yeah, here. So is it visible?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, cool. I have prepared very simple slides just to give you an idea of what this course is about and what you're going to study in this course over a span of 15 weeks. So this is a course on cognitive psychology, which I will be teaching some of you. I believe I'll be teaching section A and D. I don't know if you have already been assigned to a section, but probably you will be, you have not, okay? So probably when you join, you will be assigned a section. So I'll be teaching section A and D. And the other 2 sections will be taught by, the other 4 sections will be taught by Dr. Deepak Pandyaraj and Dr. Sudarshan Kotai, who have recently joined JSPC. So these 2 professors will also be teaching cognitive psychology along with me to the other 4 sections, but I am overall managing the course. I'm the course coordinator. So these are the first semester courses, all the first semester courses that you will be having. Introduction to psychology, cognitive psychology, development across the lifespan, critical thinking and academic writing, and statistical methods. Here today, the focus is on cognitive psychology and development across the lifespan. So development you have already been introduced. I will be briefly introducing you to the cognitive psychology. So, all right, as I said, there are 3 instructors. I'll be taking some sections. Dr. Deepak will be taking some sections and Dr. Sudarshan will be taking other sections. But overall, the purpose is the instructors could be different, but the course content doesn't change. The course content stays the same for all the sections. The assignments stay the same for all sections. And also there is one final paper, the final exam that we'll be having. It's also one for all the students across the sections. So yeah. So I'll just begin with what is cognitive psychology, and then I will move on to discuss very briefly the different topics that you will be studying in cognitive psychology. And then I will very briefly be introducing you with the assignments. So what is cognitive psychology? It's a very important field, and it's a very interesting field because this is primarily the field which tells you how you think. This is a field which discusses the internal mental processes of the invisible mind. So you have all heard, okay, this is mind. How does your brain really work? And what is the functioning? The functioning of the brain is known as the mind, right? But the internal processes, how do you really measure them? So psychology, for a very long time, psychology did not really have a way to measure these internal processes, which are, for example, your sensation, your perception. How do you perceive the world around you? How do you attend to certain information and not attend to other information? How do you really take decisions? What is your risk-taking behavior? How do you measure that? Right? How do you measure problem solving? How good you are at problem solving? And how do I communicate? How am I communicating at this very point? How am I making hand gestures? How are my hand gestures coordinating with my speech? So how are all these things happening? How do we really do that? So psychology as a field for a very long time, did not have a way to measure all these questions, did not have a quantitative way of measuring that. And then cognitive psychology was introduced. And I would say it's a very clever field because it allows you to introduce different variables and design very controlled experiments. So this field, the way we have designed this course, cognitive psychology, for you is that we will be teaching you theory, but we will also be introducing you to experiments, different experiments, and how do we do that? So there is one very interesting assignment which I will be introducing you to at the end of these slides, which is a group project. So in the group project, you will be doing, as a group, you will be participating in one experiment, at least one experiment. You will be collecting data, you will be analyzing data, and you will be writing a report on it. So, and at this level, trust me, no other schools in India, no other school in India which offers cognitive psychology does that, which introduces you to the practicums and the experiments at a very early age. I learned doing experiments, I think, in my master's, not before that. And in your very first semester, if we are introducing you to how to do experiments, it's really, really critical. So what is cognitive psychology? It involves the study of internal mental processes, all of the things that go on inside your brain, including your perception, your sensation, your thinking, your memory, your attention, language, reasoning, problem solving, and also learning. So there are 5 major pillars of psychology, and cognitive is one of them, and a very important one. So what is the course content? Let me just very briefly introduce you to the different topics that will be introduced to you in the course of cognitive psychology. So we will begin the course. It's a 15 weeks course. And I think every week you will be having a 4-hour lecture divided into 2 lectures, 2 hours, 2 lectures. And in the very first week, you will be introduced to the field of cognitive psychology. So very first week is just the introductions and some of the history of the field. And we will also be discussing about some of the important people who have contributed to the field, to the development of this field. And then we will begin with the very first topic, which is the sensation and perception. So how do you really sense the things that are around yourself? So based on your 5 and more senses, you take in information, and then this information is then taken into your brain and then converted into neural signals. So how does your brain really perceives the environment around you, right? How do you see an object? How do you touch and feel an object? So all of these things will be discussed in this topic, sensation and perception. How do you perceive the world around you? Then we move on to discuss attention. What is attention? What is selective attention? What is divided attention? Why is attention so important? What are the theories of attention and the models of attention? And attention, I think all of you would agree to this, that attention is a very important topic. So at this very moment, I think a lot of things might be going on around you. Some of you, perhaps your sibling will be talking on a phone, or your dad is calling you, or I don't know, there are guests in your house. A lot of things could be going on at this very point, right? But you choose to focus your attention on the slides, on the screen. So that's your selective attention. So how do we really do that? How do we focus our attention on one aspect of the environment but not other aspects of the environment? How do we selectively process information? So that's all of these things, all of these questions will be answered in this topic, attention. And then we will move on to talk about disorders of attention and perception. And here we have some of the very interesting disorders to discuss. We have synesthesia, we have split brain. So all of these different disorders will be introduced to you and discussed with you. Then we move on to talk about memory and its disorders. So here we will be discussing short-term memory, working memory, long-term memory, and some of the memory disorders will also be discussed. For example, amnesia will be discussed, Alzheimer's will be discussed. And this part of the course is actually very, very interesting because it introduces you to some of the very interesting case studies in the history. One very famous patient, I think some of you might have heard his name, is known as patient HM, who has taught us, who was a severe amnesic patient, who has taught us a lot about memory, how memory works, and what is the physiology, what is the neurophysiology of memory, what is the role of hippocampus in memory. So all of these things that we know today are because of patient HM. So patient HM's case study will be discussed. And also there are some very interesting Bollywood and Hollywood movies on Alzheimer's, for example. So all of these things will be discussed in this course. in this part of the course content. And then we move on to talk about thinking and problem solving and its disorders. So how do you think? How do you reason? How do you process information? How do you solve problems? What are the steps in problem solving? How do we make use of heuristics? What are the rule of the thumbs? How do we take shortcuts in problem solving? And some of the disorders which are associated with problem solving. And one very much discussed disorder is the dysexecutive syndrome. So these things will be discussed in this part of the course content. And then we move on to talk about language and its disorders. Language is another very important of cognitive psychology because language is everything. If we don't have language, there is no way that we can communicate with each other. And that's what makes us different from the rest of the animal species. That's what puts us on the top of the animal species. So animal kingdom, sorry. So in this part of the course content, we will be discussing how do we communicate with each other, how do we produce language, and then what are the language disorders. Aphasia, for example, is one language disorder which is discussed broadly. So this makes up the content for the language and disorders chapter. And finally, so far, I guess you would have noticed that with each of this chapter, there is each of this chapter is associated with the disorders chapter. So you see that this entire course is actually divided into 4 different components, I would say. In one component, we study sensation perception and its disorder. And then we study memory and its disorders. Third part, we discuss thinking and problem solving and its disorders. And then we discuss language and its disorders. So you see that this is also very interesting. In cognitive psychology, generally, how is cognitive psychology is taught is that generally the normal behavior is discussed, but not the abnormal behavior in cognitive psychology. And this course is, I would say, perhaps beautifully designed to introduce you to not only give you an idea of what a normal human processing looks like, but also how an abnormal mental processes look like. So every chapter is associated with disorders in that field. And then finally, in the last weeks of the semester, we will be discussing cognition and emotion, because emotion is one important aspect, but is generally not discussed. So that's why this chapter has been introduced in this course. So here we will be discussing how your cognitive processes are influenced by your emotions. How are your memories influenced by your emotions? How is your attention influenced by your emotions? I don't know, do you believe that your memories are influenced by your emotions? Is there anyone who says yes to this? Yes, Gia says yes. It does, right? Yeah, so that's what we will be discussing, and it's a very interesting chapter. So that's what we will be discussing in this chapter. And then, so this is the course content broadly. I have not gone into details because we have the entire semester to do that. So I have just introduced you to the different topics that are part of your cognitive psychology curriculum. And if you have not been given the course manual, you will be given the course manual once, I think 1 week prior to the start of your semester, you will be given the course manual. So you will have all the information available with you. At the beginning of the semester, you will also be given the ebooks that are part of your that are your reference books. So everything will be available to you. The slides will also be shared with you. So you will have everything that you need for this course. And then I will also would like to briefly introduce the assignments that we have here. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat box and we can take the questions at the end of the session. So broadly, there are 3 assignments, but 10% of your marks are for attendance and class participation, because there are always some students in class who like to engage more, and there are some students who engage less. So I always like to put some emphasis of the marks on the class participation to encourage all the students to participate in the class and to reward those who have really participated throughout the semester. So 10% of your marks. So far, the format is 50-50%, which means that 50% of the marks will be for the internal assignments and everything. and 50% of your marks are for the final exams. So here I'm talking about the first 50%. So 10% is for attendance and class participation, then 15% is for group presentation, 15% is for group project, and last 10% is for summary and reflection paper. So this makes up the 50%, and the other 50% is the final exam. So far, this is the format, but we have it might also change, because given that it's an offline semester, it might also change to 70-30, but we are not really sure on that, and we have no information on that. So far it's 50-50%. So 15% is group presentation, where students will be forming groups of 3 or 4 students, and then they will be assigned a topic or a question for debate. So this presentation format can take the form of a debate as well, if I decide to do that. And you, in that case, you will be given a question, and you will be, presenting your side in the classroom. So this is how this group presentation is. You will be assigned a time slot, for example, 20 to 30 minutes, and you will be presenting your part in the classroom. This generally happens at the end of the semester. So last 2 weeks, I generally put the last 2 weeks for the class presentations. Then this one is a group project, which I said earlier. I think briefly I mentioned this. The group project is the experiment, because cognitive psychology is all about studying mental processes in very, very controlled laboratory settings. So how do you really do that? So as I said, I would like to teach you this at a very early stage of your career. So if time allows you, I would like to teach you how to design experiments. But if time doesn't allow us to do that, I will directly give you the designed experiments and would ask you to collect some data and then analyze the data and present your findings. So you will be given a sample report, and you can, prepare your own report. And how do you analyze the data? You will be learning that side by side in the statistical analysis course. So it's also a good opportunity to learn those ideas there and apply them here on the real life data, and you present your findings. And 10% is for summary and reflection paper, where you are generally given a topic or a question or a research paper, and you will be writing a summary of it and your own reflection. What did you learn from this? How do you what could have been better in this paper, for example? So these are the kind of questions you will be answering in the summary and reflection paper. So these are the 3 main assignments of this course, and this is it. With this, I would like to end, and if you have questions, feel free to unmute and ask.
I think we have one question on the chat, which is by Unnati. It says, is it possible to get the detailed course manual now and maybe even share through email or WhatsApp?
I don't think we are so far allowed to do that, because the course manuals have not been reviewed yet. So how this process works is that the course manuals are designed by the course instructors, and then these course manuals are submitted to the academic dean of the department. And then academic committee reviews these course manuals, and then once they are approved, then only they're shared with students. So I think we have shared our course manuals with the dean, with the academic dean, and if it gets approved, it will be shared with you in a week or so. But if you need a textbook or anything, that can be shared with you now if you would like. But I don't know if you have received your JGU email IDs, because this content generally is only shared over a shared platform with your JGU email ID. So if you have received that, feel free to email us, and then perhaps we'll be sending you a copy. We will be sending you a copy. Yeah. Yes, Gia.
Good evening, Professor. So I had one doubt. I hope I'm audible. Both of your PowerPoints mentioned a term which was practicum. So what is the difference between practical and practicum, if you could tell?
There isn't. Meenakshi, would you like to answer this, or should I? There is not really any difference. It's just the term, because practicum is often used in the North American countries, and practical is generally used in Asian countries. It's the same thing.
Okay, thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yes. Yes, sure.
Hello. I had a doubt that, like in the presentations, you told about all the scientific aspects of cognitive psychology, and so I wanted to ask about: will there be any like philosophical aspects of psychology which we will be taught?
I think this part will be discussed in the introduction to psychology course. There is some content on this, but cognitive psychology, because we only have 15 weeks to do that, and in 15 weeks of semester, trust me, it's less for cognitive psychology, because cognitive psychology has so much to offer. So we have to really cut down on some content to really finish the course, because sometimes some classes get very interesting. For example, the memory chapters, they get very interesting, and some chapters will take 2 weeks when I have planned these chapters only for 1 week. So I am not, in cognitive psychology, I am not taking into account the philosophical approach, but in introduction to psychology course, I think this part will be discussed.
Okay, thank you.
So Metallica asks, how are we going to receive the recordings via mail? I think you have to explicitly ask for the recordings if you would like to have this recording. And I think the IT team will allow you access if they do. The recordings are not with us. They are with the IT team.
Can I request Mr. Ashim to take this up? Who do they have to mail for the recording?
I think Ashim, right?
Yeah, you can mail Mr. Ashim for the recordings, and he will coordinate that.
Yeah. Yes, Unnati, please go on.
Yes, ma'am. I just have one question. So for the practicals, is it going to be there for each semester? Does it basically depend on the core course that you guys are teaching us? Because going to the labs and kind of working with those devices is something really exciting that we're looking forward to. So I just wanted to know when practicals happen.
So go on, please go on, Meenakshi.
I was just going to say that we don't have practicums for each course because the time doesn't allow that, and time and the credit structure doesn't allow us to have practicums for each course. But you will have practicums each semester for different courses. All practicums don't necessarily require you to go into labs. Specific practicums will you will go into the behavioral experimentation lab only for specific practicums. But like I said, for specifically, say, for example, for developmental psychology, there will be few classes that might be conducted in the lab. When you're doing cognitive experiments, then you will be in the lab. When you'll be doing field work and interviews and observations, then you will be in the field. So practicums can be also variously designed, and
yeah, but we have a very well equipped brain and behavior laboratory. It has all the equipments that you need as a psychologist, as a future potential psychologist. And it's very exciting to be in that lab, because I remember Meenakshi and I, we took our students last semester to the lab visit, and some of them were very excited to see all the equipments that we have. We have an EEG, we have all the psychology equipments, and the tests that you use, for example, the Rorschach test, and all of the stuff we have in the laboratory. And we have also ordered an eye tracking and an EEG, a fully functional EEG device, which I think will be arriving soon by the time you guys will join. And by the time, I think by August end or so, we will be having it. So you will, in your very first semester, I think you will be having a visit to the lab, but you will not be, because eye tracking, EEG, and all of these tests, you will not be using in your very first semester. But we are sure that we will be arranging a visit for you to the lab. And then for CogSci, as I said, there is, as one of your assignments, I have this experiment for you in mind. So that for that one experiment, and also we have to see the availability of the lab. So for that, because it's not a fully functional practicum, it's not a credit based practicum in cognitive psychology, it's an assignment of 15% marks. So if time allows me and the availability of the lab is there, I would like to do that. I would like to like make you available the lab so that you can sit in the lab and do the experiments there, collect data there, and do the statistical analysis in the lab. So we'll see how is it available. But every course doesn't have a practical associated with it. Some courses do. Some courses, in a way, they have assignments designed in a way that they give you, the enhanced experiences and the experiential learning. Carry devices, as in which devices, like your phone and your laptops? Yes, of course. Textbooks with us when we arrive at the university before the start of the course. These are ebooks. So you have your laptops with you, you have the ebooks in your laptops. And it's always encouraged to, just go through the content before you come to class so that you have a better understanding. How and when we'll get our textbooks?
Once you have your sections, you will know your course coordinators. Your course coordinators will generally coordinate and make sure that you have the textbooks. Some students, I remember that some of my students wanted to get a printout of their textbook, etc. It's not really required, but if you're very keen that you want to read from a hard copy, then before coming, you can get prints for your main textbooks. Otherwise, textbooks will be emailed to you and they will be available in hard copy in the library.
Yeah. Are any of the courses integrated with research in any semester? You are very early at that. You're not at that phase. No one is engaged in research at first semester. In the first semester, you will be, however, you will be engaged in research, I guess, in your fifth semester. That's what we have planned for you. But you will be engaged in internships in your first 4 semesters. So you have 3 mandatory internships. That's also, but for first and second internship, I think they are not hardcore research related internships, but your third internship is hardcore research related internship. So that you have, and then you will also in your fifth semester, after your fifth semester, after your fourth semester, you will also be allowed to, work with the faculty on a research topic, on a research project, if you like. If that answers your question, Unnati.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
All right. Other questions? So are you guys excited to be a part of JSPC? Excited to be on campus?
You can raise your hand and let us know. Thanks, Jia. That's encouraging.
Good. Started packing and everything? Oh, wonderful. We are also very excited to welcome you guys and interact with you in person.
I think their seniors are also very excited to have
exactly.
Them. Exactly. Quite lonely being a lone batch, so they're very happy that we now have juniors.
Yes. I think we have one more question. Do we have to do one internship every year or one after every semester? Uddayani, I guess I am the one who interviewed you, and I also pronounced the name wrong then, and I think I'm doing the same now. I'm sorry.
It's fine now. It's fine. You're doing it just right.
Okay. Internships. So there are 3 mandatory internships, and if you do it, like if you would like to finish in the first 3 breaks of your 3 years, that's fine, but it's not mandatory to finish it in like 1.5 years. So you can choose to do it in any break you like. There are 3 mandatory internships.
You can do more also if you like. offer internships after every semester during your break. So some
Yeah.
people want to take up more than 3, that's also fine, but 3 are mandatory and you can spread them across as you like.
All right, thank you.
And I think on internships and international collaborations, you have another talk. So I think Professor Garima Jain and Professor Dipali from International Collaborations team will be taking up that session. So you will be having more idea on the internships and the international collaboration, the sort of international collaborations that we have. And because for internships, it's we have signed a number of MOUs with a number of organizations. So it's not that you are the one who will be reaching out to the organizations and selecting the organization. No, we have done this work for you. So you will be having a list of the institutes and the organizations which offer open positions that break, and you can reach out to them then. So how does this entire process work will be introduced to you in the next talk. And there are, I guess, 2 more questions. The assignments, do they have to be submitted in handwritten form or can they just be printed? We do not encourage handwritten. It's we always encourage typed. So you send us the Word file. This is how it works.
So
and soft copy.
You can introduce. Yeah, so you have a UMS portal where your assignments, your professors would open up an assignment area, a file, and all your classmates, including you, will be uploading your assignments there. I think that is something that will continue now for this semester.
Yeah. And other question is, do we get extra credits or are we marked in some way for internships? Yes. It's a 3 credit point per internship, I guess, in total 6 credits. So how your course is designed is that you have 6 non-academic credits, and these are essential non-academic credits. If you don't get them, you don't graduate.
2 credits per
2 credits per internship. So it's 6 in total, 6 non-academic credits that you have to obtain in order to graduate from JSPC as a BA Psychology Honors student. Classes start on 1st August, right? Yes, right. Will we be using Google Classroom for assignments? Google Classroom, as in that's your personal choice, how you are going to interact with your teammates, if that's what you're asking. But we have MS Teams. So MS Teams is your professional networking, software and website. So you will, once you get your JGU email ID, you will have access to MS Teams. And that's where we conduct classes when it was online. When the semester was online. So that's where we conduct classes, and that's where you interact with your peers when online. Otherwise, it's physical. It's like physical classroom. You physically interact. Okay, so do we have more questions, guys? All good?
We will be having another interaction, I think, for the other courses again. And if you have some of these questions that are about assignments and classes, then you can also keep them in hand and ready for that next interaction if they come up to you during this time.
Yes, because all the courses at JSPC are designed in the same way. There are theories and classes, there are activities, and there are assignments. So other courses will also have assignments. Assignments will be different. Like I have an experiment as an assignment. Other course instructor, other course will have something else to do. But assignments are very important part of your curriculum. So every course is gonna have some assignments. So more questions, or do we conclude the session? I guess no more questions. Over to you, Meenakshi.
All right, thank you so much for being an engaging audience. I hope you've taken away something from this. It was only meant to be a very kind of quick summary of the course. You will be getting introduced to the course once you do start your classes. If you have any other doubts, my profile and Professor Divya's profile is on the JSPC website. So please go through that. You'll have our email addresses there. If you have any doubts, please feel free to write to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much and welcome to JSPC once again. And we look forward to meeting all of you.
Yep.
See you guys.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, ma'am.